What is up, YouTube? It's your girl Evelyn, and I am back with the Season 3, Episode 3 recap of Killing Eve. As always, there will be spoilers, so proceed with caution. Villanelle is on assignment in Spain, and her unwitting target, yet another political influencer, has hired her to tune a piano. So of course, Villanelle kills the woman with the tuning fork. Afterward, the sound of a crying baby leads her upstairs, where she discovers the baby along with its nanny. Villanelle becomes fascinated when the nanny begs for the baby's life. It's obvious Villanelle doesn't understand why the nanny would offer her own life in exchange for the baby's. But in Villanelle's mind, the baby possesses an intriguing power. So intriguing that after killing the nanny, she kidnaps the baby in a bid to figure out what about it elicits such power over others. She brings the baby to a meeting with Dasha, who is not amused. Dasha throws the entire baby in a trash can, then reprimands Villanelle for killing Felix, being unfocused, and just generally being a terrible employee. She then gives Villanelle her next assignment on a postcard from London. You know, where Eve lives? Villanelle resists at first, but then gives herself a pep talk. You can do it! Carolyn is attempting to host a meeting of the new and improved Scooby Gang from her bathtub, but apparently Eve has boundaries and insists on a little propriety. We learn that Carolyn has retrieved Kenny's thumb drive from police custody, and although we're not told how she did it, we can rest assured it was probably shady as hell. Eve has invited Jamie, and Carolyn's a bit salty about it. Kenny's mother and ex-boss don't trust one another. Eve steps up and plays mediator between the two. She doles out assignments, and the Scooby Gang goes their separate ways to investigate further. Back at the Bitter Pill, Eve and Bear go through Kenny's thumb drive. It contains a list of bank accounts in different countries, but one in particular stands out. An account in Geneva that Kenny named Panda, which stands for Fat Panda, which was the nickname of Chinese military hacker Zhang Wu, who you'll remember was assassinated by Villanelle in a fetish clinic in Season 1. Back then, Zhang Wu had uncovered a bank account in the Cayman Islands that was being used to pay off Frank Hailton, Eve's ex-MI6 boss and double agent for the 12. The bank account went dormant after Frank's death, but Kenny discovered that the account had recently become active, and after 3 large withdrawals totaling $6 million were made from the account, the remainder was transferred to a bank account in Geneva. The next step is to figure out who owns the mysterious Geneva account. Unfortunately, the Bitter Pill doesn't have the resources to find out, so Eve bullies MI6 agent Mo Jafari into tracking down the account's owner. Speaking of the Geneva account, Konstantin is meeting with a nervous and slightly drunk man who goes by the name of Charles Krueger. It seems Charles is in charge of the Geneva account, and the account has come up a little short, $6 million to be exact. And poor Charles is terrified of what will happen when the 12 find out. Konstantin promises Charles he'll look into it, and before he leaves, Charles asks him for some money to temporarily keep the 12 off his back. Carolyn is getting ready for a date, and Geraldine, who doesn't seem to have a job or a life she needs to return to, is oohing and awing over Carolyn as if dating is a new, rare, or strange thing for a woman who has slept her way through half of Europe. Carolyn is sitting at the bar drinking alone, and apparently has been for some time. We find out she's been stood up, and as she's leaving the bar, she runs into an old friend named Enrique. They share a laugh, and after Carolyn tells him she's been stood up, Enrique insists they grab a bite of food and catch up. Turns out, Enrique works for the Geneva Bank, and Carolyn isn't on a date, she's on the clock. The next morning, a hungover Carolyn pretends that using her exes for information is, difficult. She tells Eve that the owner of the account is named Charles Krueger, except Charles Krueger is actually a former Russian spy named Sergei, who, shockingly, Carolyn slept with in the 80s. Sergei disappeared from Russia in the late 80s, but eventually popped up as an accountant in London working under the name of Charles Krueger. While Eve ponders if Charles Krueger is the 12's accountant, Villanelle has arrived in London and is busy running errands. Her first stop is a perfumery, where she demands the shopkeeper create a powerful fragrance for her. She wants to smell like a Roman centurion whom, after being gravely wounded, becomes an all-powerful emperor. Her next stop is the Talking Toy Factory, a toy store that sells stuffed animals with personalized recorded messages. Although Villanelle finds the store psychopathic, she still records a message for Eve. Her first two attempts are angry variations of, "I should have shot you in the head," but then her voice softens, and she admits, "I can't stop thinking about you." Eve is waiting to visit Nico at the sanatorium when she's given the news he's already discharged himself. After pressuring the woman for more information, Eve finds out Nico may have gone back to his homeland of Poland. A distraught Eve is riding the bus and text-bombing Nico when the show brilliantly subverts our expectations by having Villanelle casually stroll onto the bus and greet Eve. Eve, understandably, attacks Villanelle and the two have an all-out brawl. Although Villanelle tells Eve she's not here for her, Eve fights like her life depends on it. Villanelle eventually gets the upper hand and shoves her throat against Eve's face, insisting that Eve smell her. Eve instead kisses the shocked Villanelle before headbutting her. Villanelle flees from the bus while Eve lays on the floor. Meanwhile, Carolyn and Mo are on a stakeout outside of Charles Krueger's place.
Few moments later.
A drunken Charles stumbles out, sees Carolyn, and runs. But the poor guy is so drunk he barely makes it to the corner. And as Mo and Carolyn pull up beside him, they fail to notice Villanelle, dressed as a cop, watching them. Fresh off of her bus brawl with Villanelle, a bruised and bloody Eve returns to the bitter pill. And after insisting she doesn't want to talk about what happened, she tells Jamie all about it. After a quick brainstorming session, Eve comes to the conclusion that if Villanelle isn't in London to kill her, she must be there to kill Carolyn. The 12 have realized that MI6 is investigating their accountant, and Carolyn is obviously next on their hit list. Eve calls Carolyn to warn her, but Carolyn is too busy grilling poor Charles and ignores the call. As Eve sends Carolyn a frantic text message, Carolyn and Mo are pulled over by Officer Oksana. As Villanelle approaches the driver's side door with her gun drawn, Carolyn reads the text, but it's too late. Villanelle shoots, and for a terrifying moment, we believe Carolyn has been shot in the head.
I hate it here! I want to go home!
But Carolyn has only been grazed by the bullet meant for Charles Krueger. Later that evening, Carolyn arrives home with blood still caked on her forehead. Geraldine gives her stoic mother a hug, and like always, Carolyn insists that she's fine. Konstantin, who has done almost nothing this entire episode, is getting ready for bed. He climbs in and is about to drift off when Villanelle, who'd been hiding beneath the sheets, screams and nearly gives him a heart attack. He refuses to give her the attention she craves, even when she tells him she killed a certain accountant. For some reason, Villanelle still has baby on the brain, and after wondering what she was like as an infant, she demands Konstantin help her find her family. And she also makes him smell her, insisting she now smells of power. After declining to ride the bus again, Eve is finally back at the hovel she calls home. Exhausted and in pain, she lays on her bed and suddenly hears Villanelle's voice. After a frantic search, she discovers the princess teddy bear Villanelle has left for her. Eve immediately rips open the bear to silence the repeated voice message from Villanelle. But Eve is still Eve, and when it comes to Villanelle, she has no willpower. She holds the teddy bear's heart close to her ear and listens to Villanelle's message over and over again.
Admit it, Eve. You wish I was here.
And that is it for the recap. Thank you guys so much for watching. Tell me, were you shocked by the way the reunion played out? And now that the proverbial ice has been broken with a kiss, how can Season 3 top itself after what might arguably be considered the best episode of the series? Let me know in the comments, and while you're down there, please smash the thumbs up button if you can, and I'll see you next week.